If you're a Murder Pop magazine subscriber, then you're likely already familiar with the story of Douglas Donna Perry. So you may know that against the wishes of the family of one of his victims, that Douglas Donna Perry is currently being held at the Washington Corrections Center for Women in Gig Harbor, Washington. We know this because of a 2021 whistleblower who we mention in our article on Perry and his crimes. The family of his victims believes that he still poses a unique threat to women. This whistleblower was a Department of Corrections employee who reported that men are claiming to be women to transfer prisons. Jumping over now to our Murder Pop article on Douglas Donna Perry, who in 2014 was charged with the murder of 3 sex workers. As part of Doug's defense, he is blaming Donna as almost like another personality. He says, "I'm not going to admit I killed anybody. I didn't. Donna has killed nobody." I don't know if Doug did or not. It was 20 years ago and I have no idea whether he did or not. So Doug, who claims that he is now Donna, not only refers to himself or herself, Donna, in the third person, but he is claiming that he doesn't remember anymore because he is now a woman. Douglas also claims that transitioning to be a woman was a permanent way to control violence. Jack Halberstam, a transgender professor of American and Gender Studies at the University of Southern California, told ABC News that Douglas Perry's statements were very sketchy and a desperate defense ploy. It harkens back to the discourse on multiple personalities a decade ago, that another personality has taken over my body, he said. It's an idea that we are simply competing personalities or selves. If you talk about transgenderism or psychopathology, nobody really believes that stuff. That research is now pretty much flawed. So now that you are caught up with the story, let's move on. Activists continue to push for self-identification to determine sex categorization. Sex categorization. For instance, the sex categorization that a person falls into determines which facility that they're housed in. It also determines how police keep records. It's also unclear how this will impact the accuracy of statistics, the accuracy of criminology data. For example, men are nearly twice as likely to hurt animals compared to women, and they are drastically more likely to engage in violent sex crimes. And compared to women, they're more likely to engage in violence, period. So you can see where this is going. The recent case in the UK of the cat killer Scarlet Blake, who was found guilty of the sex fantasy murder of George Martin Carino, a 30-year-old engineer for the BMW Mini, might be a good guide for how this is playing out. The Daily Mail reports that Blake, despite being jailed in a male prison for 24 years to life, will be recorded in police statistical records as a woman because he told police that he identified as a woman after he was arrested. Scarlet Blake immigrated to the UK from China when he was like 9 years old, and a few years later he came out as transgender. Blake was formerly known as Alice Wang, and also pled guilty to criminal damage in relation to the torture, killing, mutilation, and dissection of a neighbor's cat, which he live streamed on the internet 4 months before the murder of George Carino took place. The murder of this cat and the live stream of that process was a sick, twisted Valentine's Day gift for his love interest. The day afterwards, Blake took pictures of a missing poster for Starlet, the cat that he killed. The missing posters that the cat's owners had put up in the hopes that they would find their cat. Blake, who was 26, said that he was inspired to kill this cat after watching the Netflix series Don't Fuck with Cats. If you haven't seen this, it is insane. Don't Fuck with Cats came out in 2019, and it is a true crime docuseries about a crowdsourced amateur investigation into a series of animal cruelty videos that were uploaded by a Canadian porn actor named Luca Magnotta, a self-absorbed narcissist wannabe model, whatever. Luca had subsequently, after uploading all of these cat videos, which are horrific, if you haven't seen it, warning. After uploading these videos of the cats, progressed to wanting to kill people and ended up murdering a Chinese student named Huan Lin. While on trial, Scarlet Blake told the jury of his long-distance relationship with Ashlyn Bell in America, who is also trans. Blake said that he started his transition at the age of 12, and that after meeting Ashlyn Bell, he was asked to kill somebody. And to make Ashlyn happy, he recorded a fake confession. The reason that Scarlet Blake was arrested in the first place was because he and Ashlyn had a big argument and a huge falling out. And Ashlyn then reported him to the police. So luckily this whole video confession thing was available because originally a coroner had determined that Carino had died after accidentally drowning due to alcohol intoxication. But what really happened was that Scarlet Blake had hit him over the head, strangled him to death, and then hid his body in a river. Just like Scarlet Blake took photos of the poster of the cat, he returned to the scene of the crime. He returned to the river and took some more photos. Carino's grieving family had set up a memorial near the river where his body was found, and Scarlet Blake took photos of the memorial and then of a tree near the river. So supposedly, like, why take a photo of the tree? It's likely where the strangling happened. Blake said that Ashlyn would have punished him if he didn't kill the neighbor's cat. Ashlyn's in the United States. Scarlet Blake is in the UK. Scarlet Blake testified that he had visited Ashlyn Bell in Colorado, and that I guess he was afraid of Ashlyn because Ashlyn didn't like his current girlfriend or something, Evie Brockman. And he said that Ashlyn held them at gunpoint. He was able to get the rifle away from Ashlyn and said Ashlyn then started hitting Evie and making threats, and Evie was very panicked at this point because she was worried that she was going to get killed by Ashlyn, allegedly. Ashlyn is a bit of a weird character too. Ashlyn apparently had an intimidating collection of weapons and Nazi memorabilia, though a video was played and Evie Brockman was crying and said that she was afraid of both Scarlet Blake and Ashlyn Bell. Scarlet Blake told the court that killing the cat and putting its body in a blender was something that he very much didn't want and had to emotionally distance himself to be able to do it. Veterinarians said that the cat, named Starlet, would have experienced excruciating pain for up to 3 minutes. In previous video calls with Ashlyn Bell, Scarlet Blake cut himself and put a noose around his neck, and in one message told Ashlyn, "I'm a borderline psychopath, I love death, LOL." All in all, the judge said that while there was no evidence of any sexual activity at the murder scene, that there was ample evidence that Scarlet Blake derived sexual gratification from the strangulation, adding, "There was therefore a clear sexual motivation for the killing. You also believe that you would derive pleasure, whether sexual or not, from the experience of killing a person. I am sure that you did derive pleasure from killing George, as you had from killing the cat. Ew. The judge also addressed a number of excuses that Scarlet Blake tried to make to mitigate his crimes. The judge said there is no evidence that you suffer from any relevant mental illness or other mental disorder. What you did is not the fault of a society that didn't accept you. It is not the fault of your parents. Whatever role Ashlyn Bell may have played in encouraging your interest in killing, she remained in the United States. She did not control or direct you. Even if the decision was motivated in part by a desire to please her, the decision to kill was entirely yours. Blake's own lawyer said openly in court that he would likely spend the rest of his life in prison. She may well be detained for the rest of her life. If no parole board comes to the conclusion, she is safe for release. Looking at her background, she is, in one sense, a dangerous person. With the lifestyle she has adopted, it's unlikely that any parole board will feel she is fit to be released. During the trial, Blake referred to himself as us and we, and has used at least 6 different names that we know of, which include Alice, Scarlet, and Candy. He said that Candy, particularly, is still here. So presumably he means in his head. He's also known to have used other pseudonyms to mask his identity on the internet. What's concerning about this is that Scarlet Blake is being recorded as a female perpetrator. This inevitably will lead to aberrant analysis of crime statistics and methodologies. So moving on to some studies that have been done about this. A study from the Correctional Services of Canada titled Gender Diverse Offenders with a History of Sexual Offending found that 44% of Canadian trans women convicts were sex offenders of some kind. Studies also show that the experiences of transgender prisoners are more difficult than other prisoners, as their otherness is used as a weapon against them by fellow prisoners through intimidation and violence, including sexual violence, and by prison officers through neglect and ignorance. Another study by the National Center for Transgender Equality found that transgender prisoners were victimized at nearly 10 times those for prisoners in general, and reference previously released research, including a California study which found that of transgender women held in men's prisons, 59% had been sexually assaulted by another prisoner. Other studies show that this group is overrepresented in sex offender populations, and unpublished research commissioned by the Ministry of Justice in the UK, in which sex offenders in men's jails who had recently transitioned were questioned about their experiences. So this study found that some men serving prison time for sexual offenses are faking new identities as transgender women, according to other trans women sex offenders who resent the imposters. This is a massive problem. Prisons have to keep their prisoners safe. It's, a very violent, hostile environment with kind of the worst of the worst. So it's already a difficult task that most prisons already fail at doing. In December 2021, an anonymous report was made by a former inmate at the Washington Correctional Center for Women saying that female inmates had been assaulted by male inmates who were transferred to the women's center, saying that they were women. So these male inmates identified as female and then are transferred to the women's facility and then have been assaulting female inmates. One of these assaults was allegedly committed by Princess Zoe Andromeda Love, aka Hobby W. Bingham, who has a criminal history that includes the rape of a 12-year-old. Love was one of over 150 males who were set up to make the same move to a women's facility. At this facility, Love sexually assaulted a female inmate with developmental disabilities. He was then released. He was released back into society, according to Scott Fleming, a former correctional officer at the Washington Correctional Center for Women. According to various media sources, after his release, he went back to identifying as male. According to Scott Fleming, when he went to check the incident report on this, he found that it had been erased. It was erased as part of a cover-up, in his opinion, because the Washington Correctional Center for Women is facing a lawsuit about the release of gender identity information as it relates to where the incarcerated are being housed. Also related, but not directly, a federal judge in Spokane ruled that records that could potentially identify transgender inmates must remain sealed and cannot be released to the press, even if those records are stripped of information that may be used to identify the inmates. As somebody who has filed a number of public records requests and FOIAs, also as it so happens in the state of Washington, this is very concerning because as part of the Freedom of Information Act and public records requests, as it says in the name, you should be able to do that, and to completely bar any ability to get to access information is wrong. It's not okay, because the way that it's usually handled is when you get information, any personally identifying info is redacted. It's the whole point of redactions, to take out personal info, like someone's full name or address or date of birth or social security number or whatever, family members' names. Yeah, so I feel like that's already put in place. So to do this for people who identify as being trans, and they may not even be, it could just be some guy who's trying to gain access to a women's facility, some guy like Princess Zoe. It's very concerning that this is the ruling that has come down. The Spokesman Review reported that U.S. District Court Judge Thomas O. Rice granted a preliminary order which prohibits the Washington Department of Corrections from releasing prison records even if they're anonymized. The records were sought by the Tacoma News Tribune, KIRO Radio, and several other media organizations, and document complaints made against transgender inmates at the Washington Correction Center for Women in Gig Harbor. I just want to show you a quick hilarious example, because I was trying to get a copy of Israel Keys's A Non-Trans Person, but nevertheless a criminal in Washington. I was trying to get a copy of his driver's licenses, and this is the I just want to illustrate. This is the initial driver's license that I got through my public records request. Pretty good job of redacting information. They did eventually give me an unredacted one, but they wouldn't share his photo at all, which is so dumb for a number of reasons. Anyway, I digress. I'm getting off topic here. But like, okay, moving on. Wisconsin, a man named Mark Campbell, who raped his 10-year-old daughter, is currently in Tachita Correctional Institution, which is a women's prison in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Fond du Lac.
Fond du Lac is how it's said. Now, you might be curious to learn what it means in French. Well, it means bottom of the lake.
So this man raped his 10-year-old daughter and is being held in a women's facility. Another man named Jason Michael Hann was sentenced to death in 2014 for murdering his 10-week-old daughter, Montana, and his 2-month-old son, Jason. The children's mother, Chrissy Wernz, was sentenced to 15 years to life for aiding Jason Hann by driving the bodies of their children cross-country to dispose of them. So how does this tie in to this issue? Well, Redux reported that Jason Michael Hann, who was originally sentenced to death, was transferred from death row in San Quentin to a Central California women's facility after the California governor, Gavin Newsom, imposed a moratorium on executions in California in March 2019. And Hann began to identify as a woman. So death row off the table, Hann gets to go to a women's facility where he is now awaiting a taxpayer-subsidized breast augmentation. Also, in the Cheshire home invasion case, which you may have read on Murder Pop magazine, after Stephen Hayes, now Linda Hayes, and Joshua Komisarjevsky destroyed a family, raping and murdering both a mother and her 11-year-old daughter before setting them on fire. After all that, Stephen Hayes declared that he had been diagnosed with gender identity disorder at age 16, but that it had never been treated. Stephen now goes by the name Linda Hayes and was undergoing hormone therapy as part of his gender transition while incarcerated at the Men's State Correctional Institution in Benner Township, Pennsylvania. Stephen/Linda and Joshua were both originally sentenced to death, but since then the state of Connecticut has said that the death penalty is unconstitutional, and both of their sentences were commuted to life in prison. Hayes has been transferred to a facility in Pennsylvania after it was declared that it would be unsafe for him to remain at a facility, remain incarcerated in Connecticut. And a yet-to-be-released story that is currently in development on Murder Prop magazine that talks about a white supremacist with ties to the bombing of the Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City, Peter Commander Pedro Langen, who came out as trans while fighting to undergo reassignment surgery after serving 18 years in a male prison. Langen publicly renounced his white supremacy before his transfer to the Carswell Federal Medical Center women's prison in Fort Worth, Texas, after a 2014 legal victory. During the early 1990s, Commander Pedro, or Peter Langen, was one of the founders of the Aryan Republic Army. Langen testified for the defense at the trial of Terry Nichols, whose attorneys said that Langen possesses information that other members of his group may have assisted McVeigh in the plotting and execution of the bombing. And at least one source claimed that the proceeds from Peter Langen's robberies helped fund the 1995 bombing of the Murrah Federal Building. The lawsuit, Fleming versus the United States, all of the power just went out. Cool. The lawsuit, Fleming versus the United States, specifically names Langen, in addition to a number of other transgender women currently incarcerated at the Federal Medical Center Carswell, which is a federal prison just outside of Fort Worth, Texas. This lawsuit alleges that they committed acts of violence against incarcerated women, though Langen denies harming anyone at Carswell, which he stated in an interview with The Intercept. Along those same lines, a former prisoner in the Rose M. Singer Women's Jail on Rikers Island filed a lawsuit alleging that staff at Rikers ignored her warnings in 2022 that a transgender woman in the female prison population was actually a man pretending to be a woman in order to prey on the opposite sex behind bars. Investigative reports that were obtained by Rose Doe's attorney were provided to NBC's 4 New York, and those showed that Rose had complained to correctional staff that a new detainee at the facility had propositioned her for sex, and then 2 days later had groped her in the bathroom. The acting warden, Floyd Phillips, sent an email saying, "I feel that individual is not suitably fit. Rose Doe does not want to remain in the unit due to feeling unsafe." So the warden sends out this email saying that Rose Doe doesn't feel safe. Literally the next day, according to the lawsuit, the next day, Rose Doe is sleeping and this perpetrator enters her sleeping area and rapes her. So this perp has taken the opportunity now to sexually assault her again. In a letter to Rose Doe that is dated June 26th, 2022, jail investigators said that there was insufficient evidence to make a final determination as to whether or not the event occurred. Rose told NBC4, "I'll be scared for the rest of my life." A spokesperson for the New York City Department of Corrections declined to comment on the lawsuit. This lawsuit, by the way, occurred just a year after activists demanded that the New York City Council and the Department of Corrections make it easier for inmates to be imprisoned in line with their gender identities. In a hearing on gender equity in jail, Dr. Rachel Golden, a psychologist who specializes in gender-affirming care, told lawmakers that it would be a mistake to think that men who commit compulsive sex crimes would pose as trans women for access to victims. Golden testified that trans women are far more likely to be the victims of sexual violence if they're housed in male prisons. So clearly there is a disconnect here. On the one hand, keeping trans women incarcerated with their natal sex exposes them, so trans women being biological men, right? Keeping them in male facilities exposes them to cruel and unusual harm. On the other hand, incarcerating trans women with women exposes women to a group that is statistically way more likely to be sexually motivated criminals who target women and girls. So to that point, how are prisons supposed to differentiate between inmates who want to gain access to populations that they can victimize versus inmates who are highly likely to be victims themselves if they remain in male facilities? What guardrails are being put in place to protect female inmates? And how do we ensure the accuracy of criminology statistics? How will Princess Zoe Andromeda Love and Scarlet Blake and Stephen Linda Hayes be recorded in crime statistics? And how many inmates will be assaulted and raped, as in the case of Rose Doe? It's not a good situation. It's very complicated. And yeah, this is pretty much an international issue. Anyways, that is all for now. You can go read more about Scarlet Blake and the other stories mentioned in this video by subscribing to Murder Pop magazine for free or as a paid subscriber at www.murderpm.com. murderpop.com. Murderpop Magazine is my own platform for sharing these stories with you where Google can't censor me or your comments. These stories are delivered right to your email and may contain audio and video, along with tons of pictures. There's lots of great articles available for free for everyone, with our full archive available for paid subscribers. Thank you guys so much for watching. My name's Victoria Evans. Be safe out there.
I got nightmares in my head.